Chapter 1441. The master of the Yuan family knew that his actions would bring harm to the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi. However, he was still the master of the family. It was true that he had to follow the ancestor's words, but he also wanted to see how the third Miss could impress the ancestor. He didn't need to do anything. There were plenty of young people in the family. Whether they were from the direct line of descent or the collateral line, they were all fighting for those resources. Young people were the most hot-blooded. If Yuan Tianyi wanted to enjoy that kind of treatment, she naturally had to show the corresponding strength. The ancestor of the Yuan family didn't tell anyone about the appearance of an ancient summoner's bloodline in the family. Ancient summoners were too rare. There would always be some people who couldn't help but be jealous. The Yuan family was strong, but it didn't necessarily mean that they could guard against it. It was better to let the child make a name for herself. At that time, she would naturally have enough strength to protect herself. Even if her identity was exposed, others could only watch with envy. In the law enforcement patriarch's courtyard, he had seen the power of that man with his own eyes. He also saw his cloud-soaring eagle was so scared that even the ancestor was alarmed. Then, the ancestor gave such an order. He didn't believe that man's words that he was the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi's contracted magical beast. He probably thought that the man and the third Miss had something to do with each other, so the ancestor valued the third Miss so much. What was his identity? He restrained himself for a long time and finally couldn't help but summon the cloud-soaring eagle. As soon as the cloud-soaring eagle came out, its body tensed up. Although it wasn't nearby, it could feel that person's breath. Obviously, that person was still in the mansion. The law enforcement patriarch looked at him and became more curious about the man's identity. The cloud-soaring eagle heard his words and was silent for a moment. Then it said a name softly. Looking at the law enforcement patriarch's eyes, the cloud-soaring eagle felt a little better. It didn't make sense that others didn't know about it when it was worried and scared. Summoners and magical beasts should share blessings and misfortunes together. It patted the law enforcement patriarch with its wings and said very kindly, "Remember not to tell others about this matter. That person's temper is not very good. If he hears others talking about him, he may be unhappy." The law enforcement patriarch nodded blankly. Then, the cloud-soaring eagle left in a good mood, leaving patriarch of law enforcement sitting in the yard for a long time with mixed feelings. It was actually that person. Elder of law enforcement felt that he should treat the third Miss better in the future. In another courtyard, Yuan Qin was complaining about the dishes on the table. When the servants in the room saw that something was wrong, they quietly retreated. Their master and the third Miss of the direct line of descent had been at odds for a long time. Now that they knew that the third Miss had risen to the top in a single bound, it would be strange if they were happy. That's right. Yuan Qin was not happy right now. She was very unhappy. She was a person who had experienced that scene with her own eyes. Just like Patriarch of Law Enforcement, she did not think that it was Gu Shengyin's fault at all. Instead, she thought that Gu Shengyin had benefited from the mysterious man in red. On the one hand, she secretly envied Gu Shengyin's good luck, and on the other hand, she spurned Yuan Tianyi, that waste, who could only rely on these unconventional means to reach the sky in one step. If you have the ability, then speak with your talent. 8 o'clock ended. Monthly votes. Monthly votes. Monthly votes. Our slogan is, make it to the top. Rank up the rankings. Rank up the rankings. The goal is to enter the top 5. Yes, I'm so useless. I'll be happy if I can enter the top 5. Everyone, go to bed early after reading the article. Good night. Chapter 1442. In short, the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, was really famous in the Yuan family. Many people turned their gazes towards the small courtyard that was usually quiet and kept a low profile. Thoughts that only they knew were running through their minds. All of this, Gu Shengyin, who was still sleeping, didn't know. Lin Yuan knew, and he probably knew the thoughts of the Yasuhara family. It's just that he had always been very arrogant, and he didn't put such a little test in his heart. Wasn't it just the resources of the Yuan family? If the little girl wanted it, he could give her as much as she wanted. When Gu Shengyin really woke up, it was already 3 days later. In these 3 days, there were many people who came to inquire about the news in the name of visiting, but without exception, they couldn't even enter the door. Lin Yuan was a little polite to the Yuan family's old ancestor, but what were the others? Was it worth him to receive them? Those people who hit a nail on the head could only look unsightly. In the end, they still had to go back. First, the current third Miss Yuan Tianyi was no longer the little transparent person from before. They could no longer openly make things difficult for her. Second, she had a very powerful expert by her side. Even if they wanted to use force, they were not the other party's opponent. But there was always resentment. These people usually had their eyes on top of their heads, and they didn't put Yuan Tianyi in their eyes at all. As a result, now that she was in power, it was difficult to even see her. The rumor quickly spread in the Yuan family, saying that the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, had her eyes on top of her head and looked down on them young masters and young ladies. Gu Shengyin didn't know at the moment that she just slept and took on such a bad name. But even if she knew, she wouldn't care. Only those who couldn't do anything about it would work on their words. As soon as she woke up, she met Lin Yuan's burning eyes. Seeing that she finally woke up, even if he knew that the blood awakening was not a dangerous thing, Lin Yuan was still relieved. He said with some disgust, "You can really sleep, and you slept for 3 days." 3 days? Gu Shengyin looked at the person who didn't look tired at all, and her heart was moved. "So you sat here and watched me for 3 days?" Lin Yuan suddenly revealed a smile. His eyes became affectionate as he stared at Gu Shengyin. "That's right, I've been by your side for 3 days. Are you touched? Do you want to marry me?" He was just joking. He didn't expect Gu Shengyin to nod without hesitation. "Sure." "Lin Yuan," Gu Shengyin said with a smile, "you're so good-looking and powerful. No matter how you look at it, I'm the one who benefits, right?" "This girl." Lin Yuan smiled helplessly and said, "Are you hungry? I'll go get you something to eat." Gu Shengyin shook her head. She did not avoid Lin Yuan. She stretched out her right palm, and a moment later, a green light condensed into 2 small green fruits. She looked at Lin Yuan's astonished eyes and handed him a fruit. "This is my little secret. Don't tell anyone else." Since waking up from this sleep, she felt that the power in her body had grown for a long time, and even the power of her soul seemed to have been strengthened. This level of creation didn't cost her much strength at all. Lin Yuan held the small fruit in his hand and looked at Gu Shengyin with surprise and even a trace of seriousness. Chapter 1443. You didn't take it out of the storage space, but yourself changed it? Lin Yuan asked. Changed it out? Gu Shengyin was a little dissatisfied with this statement. She retorted, "It's obviously created." Lin Yuan looked at her pouting and staring at him. He only felt that it was extremely cute. He joked, "I say, girl, in addition to the ancient summoner bloodline, you don't have any tree demon bloodline, do you? Otherwise, how can it bear fruit?" This time, Gu Shengyin could tell that he was joking with her. This man. She thought for a moment and suddenly stretched out her palm again. A moment later, a budding red rose appeared in her palm. She handed the flower to Lin Yuan. "This is for you." There were no roses in this world. Lin Yuan looked at this strange flower, reached out and took it. He put it on the tip of his nose and sniffed it. "It's very fragrant and beautiful." Gu Shengyin laughed. She didn't tell Lin Yuan the meaning of the red rose. She couldn't let this man be too cocky. At this time, Lin Yuan put down the rose with a serious face and said to Gu Shengyin, "What's with your strange ability?" Gu Shengyin stared at him blankly. "I don't know. I suddenly had it some time ago. Could it be that this is also the ability of the ancient summoner?" This ancient summoner's saying was told to her by Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan shook his head. The ancient summoner can't do this. He had lived for a long time. Of course, he knew that the ancient summoner was only a little more powerful than the ordinary summoner. But the ability Gu Shengyin showed was already creation. The more powerful he was, the stronger Lin Yuan's perception of certain things was. He could see that Gu Xingyi's method was no longer something that a simple person could have. What was it? Lin Yuan didn't dare to say. He suddenly became a little uncertain about the future. Originally, he thought that with his ability, no matter what, he could always protect the little girl in this life, so that she wouldn't have any worries or depression for the rest of her life. However, Gu Xingyi's performance exceeded his expectations. He was afraid that something unpredictable would happen to Gu Shengyin. If Gu Shengyin knew about his thoughts, Gu Shengyin would definitely comfort him not to think too much. She was just lucky enough to draw a useful and high-class golden finger. It was definitely not as complicated as Lin Yuan thought. However, Lin Yuan didn't tell Gu Shengyin about his worries at all. He was afraid that she would be afraid and worried. Therefore, Gu Shengyin did not know that her actions had caused her lover to worry. In the end, Lin Yuan asked a lot of questions. After learning that Gu Xingyi's ability could only create plants, his heart was relieved a little. If it was really omnipotent, he would be even more worried. He looked at Gu Xingyin seriously and said, "Who else knows about this ability of yours?" When he said this, his heart was already filled with murderous intent. The less people knew about this kind of thing, the better. Gu Xingyin shook her head and blinked at him. "I'm not stupid. How could I tell others about this kind of thing? You're the only one I told." In fact, if it wasn't for her lover, even if it was her contractual magical beast, Gu Xingyin wouldn't dare to tell Lin Yuan about her ability. Lin Yuan's heart suddenly softened because of Gu Xingyi's words. Softened. In her mind, he was different from everyone else. He was the most special. Chapter 1444. Gu Shengyin had just woken up. After eating something and taking a comfortable bath, someone came over. Since Gu Shengyin had woken up, Lin Yuan's mood was much better. Naturally, these things were up to Gu Shengyin to decide. The person who came in was still Gu Xingyi's old acquaintance, Yuan Tianheng. Since Yuan Tianheng entered the door, his eyes were fixed on Lin Yuan. Was it this man? It was rumored that the patriarch gave Yuan Tianyi the highest level of treatment. As for his big black, ever since he entered the door, his imposing and ostentatious spirit had all been retracted. Even his tail was obediently tucked in. Big Black was just an ordinary dog. At most, he was a little more spiritual than an ordinary dog, but he still couldn't compare to a real magical beast. He didn't know the man in red in front of him, but he felt that the other party's aura was very scary. If it wasn't for his master holding him, he would have run away immediately with his tail between his legs. Scared the dog to death. Lin Yuan was looked at by this teenager with such a gaze, but he didn't feel uncomfortable at all. It was rare that he didn't get angry. Not to mention anything else, just this point alone made Gu Shengyin curious. But Yuan Tianheng was here, so she couldn't ask. Gu Shengyin looked at Yuan Tianheng with a smile. I wonder what elder brother Tianheng came to me for? Yuan Tianheng should be the person she had the best impression of after coming to the Yuan family. Although his talent wasn't the best, his determination was rare. As long as he didn't die prematurely, such a person's future achievements would definitely not be bad. Yuan Tianheng's twilight retracted from Lin Yuan's body and fell on Gu Xingyin's body. His sister seemed to have gained some weight during this period of time, and her pale face seemed to have a little more color. She looked a lot better than before. Realizing that his thoughts had drifted to some messy place, Yuan Tianheng coughed dryly. He still had that cold appearance, looking at Gu Xingyin and said, I heard that younger sister Tianyi received the family's first-rate share, so I came to congratulate you. In addition, such an opportunity is really rare. Sister Tianyi should work hard to cultivate and not waste such resources. His words were not polite. Those who did not know him would definitely think that he was mocking Gu Xingyin, but Gu Xingyin herself could see the sincerity in his eyes. Yuan Tianheng truly felt that since Yuan Tianyi could get such an opportunity, she should work harder to cultivate. Otherwise, it would be a waste. As for jealousy, he didn't think there was anything to be jealous of. If he wanted to be nurtured better by the family and obtain more resources, then he would have to cultivate well, work hard to show his strength, and speak with facts. As for Yuan Tianyi's situation, whether it was a whim of the head of the family or because of the master behind her, it was all her own luck. Yuan Tianheng had never been jealous of others. If he had the time, he might as well spend it cultivating or building a relationship with Dahei. Sensing that he was sincerely admonishing her, Gu Xingyin's smile became more sincere. "Don't worry, brother Tianheng. I won't let you down." There were too many things that she wouldn't let down, and she also had the confidence that she wouldn't let them down. After receiving Gu Xingyin's affirmative reply, Yuan Tianheng nodded and turned to leave without saying a word. Gu Xingyin secretly laughed. This Yuan Tianheng was a person with an interesting personality. Lin Yuan originally thought that this kid was not bad, but when he saw Gu Xingyin looking at his back and smiling happily, he suddenly became unhappy. Chapter 1445. He said coldly, "This brat is too straightforward and unreasonable. I'm afraid he'll offend a lot of people in the future." Gu Shengyin turned her head strangely, as if she couldn't understand why Lin Yuan would say such a thing. Seeing her gaze fall on him, Lin Yuan's unhappy mood dissipated a lot, but he still said with a straight face, "Little girl, you'd better stay away from him in the future. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll be implicated in the future. You're the ruler of the 9 hells purgatory, and you're worried about being implicated? Isn't cultivating wholeheartedly and ignoring the affairs of the world your favorite temperament?" Gu Shengyin lowered her head and thought for a moment. He clearly didn't get angry when Yuan Tianheng looked at Lin Yuan like that at first, which meant that he admired Yuan Tianheng. Why did he suddenly become like this? After carefully thinking about all the things that happened after Yuan Tianheng came over, Gu Shengyin came up with a conjecture that made her not know whether to laugh or cry. This man, could he be jealous? She thought for a moment, then suddenly walked to Lin Yuan's side, raised her hand, and hugged his waist. Lin Yuan was stunned for a moment, and then his heart softened. Softening. Gu Shengyin raised her head to look at him, and only his figure was left in her eyes. "Big brother Tianheng is the person who treats me the best in this Yuan mansion. Although his personality is a bit cold, he's still a good person. I don't have a biological brother, so I've always treated him as my brother." When he heard the words "Big brother Tianheng," Lin Yuan was still a little unhappy, but after hearing the words, his mood changed. When he heard Gu Shengyin say that she was loved, his heart immediately ached. When Gu Shengyin said that Yuan Tianheng was her brother, the ruler of the 9 hells purgatory, who didn't have a firm moral integrity, suddenly changed his view of Yuan Tianheng. He picked up Gu Shengyin and slowly said, "Your clan brother is not bad. He will definitely be extraordinary in the future." Gu Shengyin almost laughed out loud. She finally understood that this person was really jealous just now. However, Lin Yuan hugged her, and every word seemed to be a declaration. "In the future, with me by your side, I will properly protect you, pamper you, and no one will ever bully and humiliate you again." Gu Shengyin's heart trembled. She looked at this man and felt a warm current in her heart. She stretched out her hand and hugged Lin Yuan tightly. She said with a smile, "You said it yourself. You have to pamper me and not let anyone bully me." "Of course." Gu Shengyin felt that the atmosphere was too flirtatious. She raised her eyebrows and said, "No, how can I be bullied? I'm going to bully others." The tenderness that had just surged up in Lin Yuan's heart instantly dissipated. Looking at the little baby in front of him, he laughed and said, "All right, all right, all right. When the time comes, I'll help you bully others." Gu Shengyin said confidently, "You said it yourself. If I cause trouble, I'll tell them that you're the ruler of the 9 hells purgatory and let them settle the score with you." If anyone else dared to say that, they would have been slapped to death by Lin Yuan. But the one who said that was Gu Shengyin. Lin Yuan felt that this little girl was born to subdue him. Otherwise, how could she casually draw a summoning array and summon him out? Not only that, he even asked to form a contract with someone as if he was possessed. He simply had no bottom line. If it was half a year ago, if someone said that he would be like this in the future because of a person, Lin Yuan would definitely not believe it and would teach him to speak properly. Perhaps this was the so-called natural devil star? However, he was willing to endure it. Chapter 1446. Therefore, when faced with Gu Xingyin's words, Lin Yuan only smiled and said, "You only need to report. There really aren't many who would dare to cause trouble in my 9 hells purgatory. If there really were, he would just throw them out." Just like that, the two of them spent the rest of the afternoon together. At night, other than the person who came to deliver dinner, there was another person. Gu Shangyin raised her eyebrows as she held the exquisite jade bracelet in her hand. Just as Yuan Tianhing said, the Yuan residents gave her the highest treatment. This jade bracelet was the key to enter the family's cultivation hall. Not just anyone could enter the Yuan family's cultivation hall. At the very least, only those with intermediate summoner talent and above had the qualifications to enter. The previous Yuan Tianyi didn't have the qualifications at all. Gu Shangyin played with the jade bracelet in her hand. Lin Yuan frowned and said, "What kind of cultivation hall is this? A few brats who haven't even entered sainthood are just messing around. What's there to go?" Gu Shangyin, she always thought that she could be very arrogant, but in front of Lin Yuan, she realized that she was really too young. The Yuan family's cultivation hall's hall master was a 9th-rank summoner, and there were more than 10 advanced summoners. Even in the entire Dragon Phoenix Empire, such strength could be considered as one of the most powerful. It was said that even the imperial family wanted to send their disciples into the Yuan family, but they were rejected by the Yuan family's patriarch because the family's cultivation hall doesn't allow outsiders. This also showed the Yuan family's status in the empire. However, in Lin Yuan's eyes, this cultivation hall was just a small brat who hasn't even reached sainthood. Gu Shangyin helplessly face-bombed. Did this big boss really think that sainthood experts were cabbages? How could a mighty saint-level expert have the time to teach a group of children? At this time, Gu Shangyin finally understood that the best way to show off wasn't really showing off, but when you thought he was showing off, what he said was the truth. Lin Yuan didn't notice Gu Shingyin's inner ridicule at all. Instead, he said very naturally, "Don't go. I'll teach you. Basically, I've dabbled in all kinds of cultivation methods that are commonly used on the continent." His words were completely modest. Gu Shengyin remembered very clearly that when Yuan Tianyi went to push the big boss in the original plot, she deliberately highlighted that this Lin Quan was a terrifying existence without any flaws. How was he just dabbling in it? He was the Red Lotus born in the 9 Serenities purgatory flame. He had lived for an unknown amount of time. The long and boring years were enough for him to study all the cultivation scriptures of the entire continent. If anyone in the magical beast continent heard Lin Yuan say that he wanted to teach them, they would be willing to cry and kneel down to call him father. But Gu Shengyin, who was fresh and unconventional, said that she wanted to refuse. Lin Yuan was not angry. In fact, when facing Gu Shengyin, he did not have the emotion of anger at all. He asked why. Gu Shengyin smiled, but her eyes were a little cold. She said, "Aren't there many of my brothers and sisters of the same clan quietly waiting to see me make a fool of myself? In order to not let them come over one by one and annoy me, I'd better let them see enough at once." Lin Yuan simply loved her like this. Her slightly narrowed eyes were full of scheming light, making people want to pick her up and kick her into their own pocket. Except for him, no one could see her. Chapter 1447. So, in front of the person you like, principles and bottom lines, what are those things? Gu Shingyin's thoughts were right. There were many young masters and young ladies in the Yuan family. The next day, they were all waiting at the entrance of the cultivation hall, ready to see her make a fool of herself. The Yuan family's cultivation hall was sealed. In order to prevent those young masters and young ladies from being disturbed, a sealing array was set up outside, and outsiders were not allowed to enter. And that small exquisite jade bracelet was the key to opening the array. But the jade bracelet alone was not enough. After each person put their jade bracelet on, the array would temporarily open a door. This door needed to be opened by the person who picked up the key to enter the real cultivation hall. And that door was not something that could be casually pushed open. At least, if it wasn't for the careful nurturing of a famous teacher since childhood, an ordinary teenage girl wanting to push it open was tantamount to a fool's dream. In the past, the Yuan family's children who were able to obtain jade bracelets were all talented. Such a door was naturally not a problem for them. However, it was said that Yuan Tianyi was a low-level talent trash. In all these years, the family had never nurtured her. Thinking about it, this door, for this unknown third young miss, was afraid that it would be a bit difficult. Such a person suddenly enjoyed the family's first-class treatment for no reason. If she couldn't even enter the cultivation hall, it was conceivable that the third young miss reputation of being a trash would be greatly spread in the family. When Gu Shengyin arrived at the cultivation hall, she discovered that there were already more than 10 young boys and girls of about the same age standing there. These people could obviously directly enter the door, but they were all waiting here. It was self-evident what they were thinking in their hearts. Gu Shengyin saw Yuan Qin standing among them at a glance. This woman really spared no effort to see her make a fool of herself. Gu Shengyin came alone. In order to cooperate with this group of people's performance, she specifically told Lin Yuan not to follow. However, for an existence at Lin Yuan's level, it was not important whether others were present or not. His spiritual power could even control the entire capital, and he could appear here in the blink of an eye. Gu Shengyin stood in front of the array formation and took out the jade bracelet. Upon seeing this, the dozen or so young boys and girls all looked at Gu Shengyin's hand with jealousy. They had spent a lot of effort to get a chance to enter the cultivation hall to cultivate and study. How could Yuan Tianyi, this trash, enjoy the same treatment as them? No, the treatment she enjoyed was several levels higher than theirs. Other than jealousy, there was also a hint of schadenfreude in their eyes. This third young miss looked thin and slender. TSK, they didn't know if this small body of hers could open the door to the cultivation hall. Gu Shengyin stretched out her hand and was about to place the jade bracelet in the center of the array formation when everyone's attention was drawn to this side. Her lips curled into a smile, and she put her hand down. Gu Shengyin turned around and looked at the group of people. Seeing the disappointment in their eyes, she asked doubtfully, "Are you all not going in?" She pointed at the array as she spoke. Everyone thought in their hearts, "I just want to see you make a fool of yourself, that's why I'm standing here waiting." Of course, when they didn't know the identity of the expert behind the third young miss, they wouldn't say this out loud. Only Yuan Qin couldn't bear it. Chapter 1448. Because she was the one who understood Yuan Tianyi the most, and also the one who knew her the most. It was because of this that she couldn't understand. How did this weak and small Yuan Tianyi catch the eyes of such a man? Thinking back to that day when she caught a glimpse of the man in Gu Shengyin's small courtyard, Yuan Qin felt her heart beating wildly. She was still young, so it wasn't to the extent that she would attract any young girl's affection. She simply thought that the man was too good-looking. All the so-called beauties she had seen in her life were all mediocre in front of that man. How could a man like that, who was strong enough to speak with the Gen family's old ancestor, take a fancy to a trash like Tianyi Uehara? Yuan Qin couldn't figure it out. The more she couldn't figure it out, the more she thought about it. The more she thought about it, the more she envied Gu Shengyin. It was as if this was a dead end. Perhaps in Yuan Qin's eyes, only if Yuan Tianyi returned to her previous weak and inconspicuous self would she be able to erase the unwillingness in her heart. It was a pity that Yuan Qin's wish would never be fulfilled. So, while everyone else was still observing and thinking, Yuan Qin bravely stood up on behalf of the public. She looked at Gu Shengyin with a mocking smile on her face, and said in a sharp tone, "We heard that third sister was coming to the cultivation hall today. We were afraid that third sister had never been here before and came to the wrong place, so we waited here." Gu Shengyin glanced at the people standing here, and the system quickly transmitted their information to Gu Shengyin's mind. With a glance, she found that most of these people were disciples of the branch family, and most of them weren't outstanding in the Gen family. But when she thought about it, the eyes of those with real talent weren't limited to the Gen family's cultivation hall. They didn't even have enough time to cultivate every day, so where would they find the time to make things difficult for Gu Shengyin, the third sister who suddenly appeared? Whether it was a stone or a treasure, there would naturally be time to examine it. What did it have to do with them? The ridicule in Yuan Qin's words was too obvious. She was just short of saying that Tianyi used to be trash and never came here before, and that she was only here for a short period of time. If it was someone with courage, they probably wouldn't be able to stand it. What Yuan Qin wanted to see the most was Gu Xingyin's humiliation turn into anger. At that time, whether she opened the door in a fit of pique or had a conflict with her, it wouldn't be her problem. Unfortunately, despite her good plan, Gu Xingyin was unwilling to play along with her. Gu Xingyin took a step back and cleared the space. Sister Yuan Qin's words make me feel ashamed. I'll have to trouble everyone to wait here. First come, first served. Everyone, please go first. Gu Xingyin looked very sincere. Everyone, was this girl really stupid or just pretending to be stupid? They obviously wanted to see her make a fool of herself, okay? Who has the time to care about you? Yuan Qin knew that Yuan Tianyi was definitely pretending to be stupid. She's SSS, but she's acting of acts of a. Lin Yuan sat in the small courtyard and watched Gu Xingyin deal with that group of idiots with a smile. He couldn't help but reveal a smile. As expected of his little girl, she was the most beautiful no matter what. Especially when compared to that group of idiots, TSK, this Zhen family is just like that. The Zhen family's old ancestor expressed that he had taken an arrow to the knee. Chapter 1449. If you all don't want to go in, then get out of the way. A cold voice sounded. Gu Xingyin heard the familiar voice and knew who it was. Sure enough, she turned her head and saw Yuan Tianheng standing there quietly with his big dog that never left his side. He clearly didn't do anything, but everyone subconsciously stayed away from him. Only Gu Xingyin looked at him with a smile. Brother Tianheng, good morning. Yuan Tianheng glanced at her, but before he could speak, the dog called Dahe happily broke free from his master's hand and rushed towards Gu Xingyin. Looking at the aggressive posture, Gu Xingyin felt that this dog was going to suffer. Sure enough, just as Dahe was about to touch Gu Xingyin, there seemed to be a layer of invisible power that burst out from Gu Xingyin's body. Dahe was directly hit and flew out. This unforeseen event happened so quickly that even Yuan Tianheng couldn't react in time. Fortunately, that layer of power didn't mean to hurt people. Dahe was only thrown out and was steadily put back on the ground. However, the experience of flying in the sky seemed to have frightened this stupid dog. He whimpered twice and ran towards his master, rubbing against his leg to seek comfort. Gu Xingyin. She couldn't bear to see this scene. When she first saw Dahe, she was deceived by his majestic appearance and thought that he was a dog that was as tall and powerful as his appearance. However, the hard facts told her that the truth was not so. This was just a stupid dog that maintained a cold and fierce appearance. Once the opponent showed a bit of fierceness, he would immediately cower. At this moment, Dahe, who turned cowardly in a second, was lying in front of his master to seek comfort. Gu Xingyin didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Yuan Tianheng looked at her with a trace of gratitude in his eyes. Gu Xingyin. However, Yuan Tianheng didn't say anything to Gu Xingyin. After he nodded at her, he didn't look at the others anymore. He took out the jade bracelet hanging on his waist and pressed it on the formation. As a layer of faint light floated up, a door made of white jade appeared in front of Yuan Tianheng. Then, he stretched out his hand, and a faint white light appeared in his palm. He slowly pushed the door open. The people standing outside could not see what was behind the door at all. Yuan Tianheng's movements were very slow, as if he wanted to let Gu Xingyin see it clearly. Then, he held Dahe's hand, turned around and said to Gu Xingyin, "I'll wait for you inside." Then, he walked in. After he entered, the white jade door slowly closed. Then, the light dissipated, and the entire door slowly disappeared. Gu Xingyin took a step forward. She placed her jade bracelet on top of the formation. Before the white jade door appeared, she suddenly turned around and glanced at these people. Her smile was extremely brilliant. I know that everyone is afraid that I'm new here and unfamiliar with everything. Perhaps I won't even be able to enter this cultivation hall. I appreciate everyone's kindness, but I heard that there is a time limit for the cultivation hall's morning class every day. I'm afraid that everyone will be late." Hearing her say this, everyone's expression changed greatly as they looked at the stone clock on the formation. There was only a few moments left before the morning class. At this moment, the white jade door appeared. Everyone saw a layer of faint green light appear in Gu Xingyin's palm. She lightly hit the white jade door, and the door obediently opened. How did she do it? Wasn't she a piece of trash who had never cultivated before? 8 chapters. Asking for votes every day, especially monthly votes. Right now, I'm ranked 5th. Asking my babies to send me to the heavens, carrot oh carrot. Also, monthly votes are limited to 2 votes per day. You can vote 5 votes per book per month. That's it. Good night, everyone. Chapter 1450. Everyone's gaze fell on Yuan Qin, who had been sparing no effort to proclaim that the third miss was a waste. She had always been the one to say how much of a waste Yuan Tianyi was, and that she was simply an insult to the Yuan family's bloodline. Yuan Qin's face was also green and white. She stared at Gu Shengyin, as if she didn't know how she did it. At this time, the door was completely open. Gu Shengyin raised her head to look at the stone clock on the wall. Her movements were extremely slow as she squatted down, as if she was tidying her skirt. Then, she leisurely rubbed her wrists, as if her movements just now had caused her wrists great discomfort. Her actions caused many people to feel contempt in their hearts. Such a small matter could actually make her this tired. It seemed that even though the third miss had barely opened the white jade door, she was still a waste in her bones. However, when Gu Shengyin finally walked through the white jade door with ease, everyone finally realized that it was already late. They looked at the wall. It was over. The Yuan family's cultivation hall had always been strict. One of the things that those teachers couldn't tolerate the most was that they didn't treat cultivation seriously. Thus, the group of people who had followed Gu Shengyin into the cultivation hall were all brought out by the strict teachers to have a good discussion. That was all for later. When Gu Shengyin entered, it did not take much effort for him to find his seat. Why? Because the Yuan family head remembered the ancestors' order to allocate the first-class resources to the third miss, Yuan Tianyi. This cultivation hall was naturally allocated according to the first class. The cultivation hall's seats were also divided according to rank. The first-class seats were naturally the most front and most center seats. Gu Shengyin looked at the empty seat in front of her. She knew in her heart that it belonged to her. In fact, the moment she entered, all of the Yuan family's disciples in the cultivation hall turned to look at her. Among these gazes, there was curiosity, scrutiny, and disdain. If it was someone who hadn't seen the world, they would really be frightened by these gazes. But what kind of person was Gu Shengyin? She had even been an empress. Why would she be afraid of a group of youths whose average age was no more than 13 years old? She calmly walked towards her seat. Seeing her like this, the teacher who was standing at the side silently nodded in his heart. Not to mention other things, her temperament are indeed worthy of praise. However, just as Gu Shengyin reached her seat, before she could sit down, something unexpected happened. The young man sitting next to Gu Shengyin suddenly raised his head and looked coldly at Gu Shengyin. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold arc. "I never sit next to trash." As soon as the young man finished speaking, a powerful aura rose from his body and unreservedly pressed down on Gu Shengyin. From the looks of it, he actually wanted to take Gu Shengyin down a notch. The teacher next to him was shocked. He did not expect this to happen. He glanced at the person who attacked. It was Yuan Tianqin, the first young master of the Yuan family, the precious child of the Yuan family. He was one of the top geniuses in the entire Dragon Phoenix Empire. Looking at this person's appearance, it was obvious that he was dissatisfied with the third miss sitting next to him. His fingers twitched in his sleeves, but in the end, he did not make a move to stop him. Forget it, it was better not to disobey this first young master. Chapter 1451. Gu Shengyin didn't expect that the young master of the Yuan family would behave like this. She carefully sensed that Yuan Tianqin was only using his aura to oppress her. He didn't try to kill her. Even so, If Yuan Tianyi had never cultivated before, she would have been forced to kneel down and make a fool of herself. This was the first time she officially appeared in front of all the elite disciples of the Yuan family. If she made a fool of herself, how could she raise her head in the future? All these thoughts only lasted for a moment. The powerful aura had already arrived in front of Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin snorted coldly. She didn't dodge and looked directly at Yuan Tianqin. When the mountain-like aura fell on her, it was like ice meeting the sun. It didn't even cause a splash and disappeared. Yuan Tianqin's eyes lit up. His icy eyes melted a little. He finally looked at Gu Shengyin and said, "You're not bad. You're sitting next to me." Gu Shengyin sneered. This young master Yuan Tianqin probably thought that she was some kind of delicious cake. Whether or not she, Gu Shengyin, was qualified to sit here wasn't up to Yuan Tianqin. She came here today just to see the geniuses of the Yuan family. She also wanted to trick someone while she was at it. Now that she had achieved her goal, there was no need to stay any longer. Especially when there was a young master sitting next to her who thought that he could ascend to heaven. Gu Shengyin carefully looked at Yuan Tianqin. She suddenly realized that this person was really good-looking. His black clothes made his white skin look even whiter and more translucent. He looked like he was carved out of ice. He was as cold as ice and as exquisite as snow. It was no wonder that such a person with such a powerful talent would develop such an arrogant personality. However, no matter how good-looking and talented he was, Gu Shengyin's face couldn't be stepped on by such a person. Hearing Yuan Tianqin's words, Gu Shengyin only glanced at the seat next to her and didn't sit down. She only raised her eyebrows and glanced at Yuan Tianqin with a smile on her face. However, the words she said made the entire Yuan clan's cultivation hall fall into silence. Unfortunately, I have the same habit as young master Yuan Tianqin. I can't have trash sitting next to me. Everyone in the cultivation hall felt that Yuan Tianyi was crazy. Did she really think that just because the clan head appreciated her, she could go to the heavens? So what if he felt uncomfortable? If you want to diss young master, at least come up with a proper reason. Who didn't know that Yuan Tianqin, the eldest son of the Yuan family, was a genius? She, Yuan Tianyi, was a trash who relied on the family head to enter the cultivation hall through the back door. She actually dared to mock the eldest young master? Yuan Tianqin was also stunned when he heard this. Then, he realized that the girl in front of him was mocking him. As expected, he was so angry that he laughed. Yuan Tianqin, ever since he was born, he had been the pride of the pride of the pride of the pride of the pride. He had grown up in the midst of everyone's reverence and admiration. He didn't expect that today, he would actually meet someone who dared to mock him. Yuan Tianqin felt that it was very refreshing. However, after this moment of novelty passed, he couldn't stop his monstrous anger. This little girl actually dared to mock him? He coldly stood up and looked straight at Gu Shengyin. The words that came out of his mouth were as cold as ice. What you just said, say it again. Chapter 1452. The atmosphere in the cultivation hall suddenly became tense. However, the majority of the people present were excited. In their eyes, this wasn't a big deal. Wasn't it just that the newcomer, Yuan Tianyi, didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and offended the eldest young master? They were waiting to see what would happen to the third young miss. TSK, TSK, TSK. They had never seen someone who dared to challenge the eldest young master twice in the Yuan family. Seeing that the situation wasn't going to be easy to clean up, the teacher who had been standing in the background finally stood up. He still remembered that the family head had once said that he would take care of the newcomer, the third young miss. Now, it seemed that this matter was going to get out of hand. He wasn't afraid of getting out of hand, and he didn't care if the third young miss lost face. He was only afraid that the eldest young master, Yuan Tianqin, would lose his temper. If he didn't hold back, the third young miss, who had just arrived today, would get into trouble in the cultivation hall. The teacher lightly coughed and looked at Gu Shengyin with a reproachful gaze. "All right, don't be angry. Third young miss, properly apologize to the eldest young master so that we can officially start the lesson." Apologize? Gu Shengyin only felt that the teacher's words were unreasonable. Gu Shengyin sneered. "When this eldest young master insulted me and even attacked me, why didn't I see you immediately intervene and ask the eldest young master to apologize to me?" As soon as she said this, the surrounding people couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This third young miss really had some guts. Not only did she dare to challenge the eldest young master, she even dared to challenge the teacher of the cultivation hall. Did she not want to stay in the cultivation hall anymore? Well said. Gu Shengyin didn't want to stay in the cultivation hall anymore. However, other people didn't know what she was thinking. They all felt that this third young miss had been provoked to the point that her mind wasn't clear anymore. She even compared herself to the eldest young master. She didn't even look at the gap between them. The eldest young master and her were like the bright moon in the sky and the smelly ditch in the wilderness. Where did she get her face from? Most people thought so in their hearts, but only Yuan Qin said it out loud. Yuan Qin had always disliked Yuan Tianyi. In the past, they simply thought that Yuan Tianyi was lucky and easy to bully. Now, it was complete jealousy and hatred. She was jealous of her good fortune and hated a good-for-nothing like her, yet she dared to live so arrogantly. Therefore, when no one wanted to stand out, Yuan Qin stood out. In fact, what she thought in her heart was right. Now that she came out, she could ridicule Yuan Tianyi. She could also sell her favor in front of the eldest son, Yuan Tianqin. What if he was lucky enough to make young master remember him? No matter how Yuan Qin thought about it, she felt that it was worth it. It was just that she didn't think that if she could think of something, how could others not think of it? If there were really so many benefits, and there were so many smart people in the Yuan family, would it be Yuan Qin's turn to take advantage of it? In the end, before the third young Mrs. Baker was revealed, those people simply did not dare to offend her too much. If they were to fail miserably, it would truly be an undeserved disaster. Only Yuan Qin was stupid. Not only was she stupid, but she also liked to show off. Therefore, after she heard Gu Shengyin's words, she stood out and scolded, "Yuan Tianyi, I say, why don't you take a mirror and look at yourself? A good-for-nothing like you doesn't even have enough status to carry the eldest young master's shoes. You still have the face to compare yourself with him?" Chapter 1453. When Yuan Qin said this, many people had a deep expression on their faces. Even if these people thought highly of themselves, when facing the eldest young master, Yuan Tianqin, they couldn't help but lower their posture. There was no other way. Yuan Tianqin's talent was really too strong. They really couldn't compare. This third Miss Yuan Tianyi, who had always been invisible, was really arrogant to the extreme. She actually dared to open her mouth and compare herself with the eldest young master? The eldest young master had the ability and confidence to say that he wouldn't sit with trash. How could Yuan Tianyi be so shameless? Not only did the disciples of the Yuan family think so, but even the teacher who had been standing on the side thought so. Only Yuan Tianheng, who was sitting in his seat, looked at Gu Shengyin with some confusion. Looking carefully, there was a trace of worry in his eyes. He thought expressionlessly. According to his understanding, Yuan Tianyi didn't seem like a brainless person. Then why would she say such a thing? It was very likely that she had someone behind her. Thinking of the man in red he saw in the courtyard before, Yuan Tianheng had a rough idea in his heart. However, he still had some worries in his heart. The Yuan family wasn't an ordinary family. Even if the man in red was very strong, could he still challenge the entire Yuan family? Yuan Qin was also certain of this, so she dared to scold Gu Shengyin. If she knew the true identity of Lin Yuan, even if she was given 100 guts, she wouldn't dare to say a word. Gu Shengyin glanced at Yuan Qin and smiled disapprovingly. "Yuan Qin, you're shouting so hard now. Remember to ask your master to give you more rewards later." Her disdainful gaze and tone, as well as the malice in her words, were clearly displayed. Yuan Qin trembled with anger. Enough. The teacher who was ridiculed by Gu Shengyin before had an ugly expression. He looked at Gu Shengyin coldly. Yuan Tianyi spoke without restraint. She contradicted her teacher and slandered her own family. As punishment, she will kneel in the cultivation hall for 2 hours. As soon as the teacher spoke, the gloating expression on Yuan Qin's face was reflected. However, Yuan Tianqin wasn't satisfied. He looked coldly at Gu Shengyin and said, "What's the point of keeping this tongue that doesn't know how to speak? Sir, you're being too kind." He actually opened his mouth and wanted to cut off Gu Shengyin's tongue. Hearing the dissatisfaction in eldest young master's tone, the teacher felt helpless. This eldest young master looked cold and aloof, but in reality, his methods were crueler than anyone else's. He still remembered that there was once a Yuan family disciple who offended him in the cultivation hall. He broke all 4 of the disciple's limbs and threw the disciple out to beg in the snow. In any case, he never saw that unlucky Yuan family disciple again. Yuan Tianqin didn't even try to hide this matter. However, his talent was there. The entire Yuan family saw him as the hope of the future. The rule of not killing one's own family was like a fart to him. This teacher didn't have a good impression of Gu Shengyin. It was just that the head of the family told him to look after the 3rd young miss, Yuan Tianyi. He didn't want to let the 3rd young miss fall into the hands of eldest young master on the first day. Otherwise, this would probably be the last time the 3rd young miss appeared in the cultivation hall. No, according to what the 3rd young miss said today, if she fell into the hands of eldest young master, it would probably be the last time she saw the sun. Chapter 1454. The teacher thought about it and decided that he couldn't follow the eldest young master's wishes this time. If the family head were to blame him, he wouldn't be able to say anything. With that in mind, he turned around and shouted at Gu Shengyin, "Did the 3rd young miss not hear what I said? You don't even want to listen to your teacher's words. Do you not want to stay in this cultivation hall?" In his mind, the Yuan Estate's cultivation hall was a sacred place in the hearts of all the Yuan family disciples. If he used this to threaten Gu Shengyin, she would definitely obediently submit. However, what the teacher didn't expect was that the 3rd young miss, Yuan Tianyi, only lazily glanced at him and actually nodded. "After seeing such a big show today, I really don't have any intention of staying in this cultivation hall." The teacher suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. What did she just say? He subconsciously glanced to his side and discovered that most of the Yuan family disciples had the same expression as him, as if they had seen a ghost. Strangely, his heart relaxed a lot. This time, the teacher was really angry. He had dedicated his entire life to the Yuan family's cultivation hall and regarded this place as more important than himself. He simply couldn't tolerate Gu Shengyin's actions of not taking his blood, sweat, and tears seriously. Moreover, this 3rd young miss wasn't some peerless genius at the peak of the world. She was just a piece of trash that even they would look down on in their cultivation hall. What right did such a person have to look down on them? The teacher's expression was extremely unsightly. He coldly glanced at Gu Shengyin. "This old man will report the 3rd young miss's words to the family head. I hope that the 3rd young miss can still be so unyielding in front of the family head in a while." Gu Shengyin nodded. "Since that's the case, I'll take my leave first." She actually walked towards the door without any reluctance. "Did I say that you can leave?" A gloomy and cold voice came from behind Gu Shengyin. At the same time, Yuan Tianqin's eyes flashed with a fierce glint. Above his head, the image of an enormous dragon condensed from ice and frost appeared. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it clawed at Gu Shengyin. From the looks of it, he wasn't holding back. If Gu Shengyin had really been caught, his head would have been crushed by the claw. Yuan Tianhing's pupils shrank when he saw this scene. He knew that he couldn't save them in time, so he couldn't help but look at his teacher. What shocked him was that Mr. was looking at him coldly at this moment, without any intention of helping him. He also didn't want to leave Yuan Tianyi alive. Yuan Tianhing's heart trembled as he looked at Gu Shengyin. Suddenly, Gu Shengyin heard the commotion and turned his head around slowly. The shadow of the giant dragon appeared above her head in an instant. However, at this moment, a green figure suddenly appeared behind her. It was a very ethereal figure in a green robe. Upon closer inspection, he seemed to be holding a huge scepter in his hand. The shadow seemed to be offended as he let out a cold snort. A green light shot out from the scepter in his hand and was aimed at the frost dragon that was about to touch Gu Shengyin. The giant dragon was hit by the green light and stagnated in the air for a second. Then, its entire body shot out and turned into a gorgeous ice mist in the air, disappearing without a trace. Gu Shengyin looked at the silent Yuan Tianqin with a faint smile. "Remember, don't call me trash every time you open your mouth. Be careful. You'll be slapped in the face." When she turned around again, the way the people looked at her had completely changed. How could someone who could easily block the eldest young master's attack be trash? Moreover, she was only 10 years old. Chapter 1455. Yuan Tianqin glared at Gu Shengyin. Upon closer inspection, the depths of his eyes seemed to be quietly entwined with crimson streaks of blood. If there was someone who understood him here, they would definitely realize that he was really angry. There were very few people who could infuriate young Master Yuan and survive in this world. Yuan Tianqin saw that Gu Shengyin didn't even turn her head to look at the people in the hall, including himself. He was so angry that he started to laugh. Suddenly, ice and snow appeared around him, filling the entire cultivation hall. Gu Shengyin stopped in her tracks. She turned around, and there was no smile on her face. "Yuan Tianqin, do you want to die?" The disciples of the Yuan family in the cultivation hall were really frightened today. That third miss, who was known throughout the family as a waste, actually dared to provoke the eldest young master in front of everyone, and even showed her exceptional talent and strength. This was already hard to believe, but this third miss was even more arrogant than the eldest young master. Just listen to what she said. Although everyone admitted that the third miss, who was only 10 years old, was really powerful, the eldest young master Yuan Tianqin had been in everyone's hearts for a long time. No one thought that Gu Shengyin could win against Yuan Tianqin. She was still too young and couldn't keep her cool. Many people thought so in their hearts. Yuan Qin, on the other hand, was looking at Gu Shengyin with schadenfreude. When Gu Shengyin showed that she could fight against Yuan Tianqin, Yuan Qin was shocked. All of this seemed to have subverted her understanding that Yuan Tianyi, who had always been a waste under her, was actually so powerful. After the shock, she was terrified. Only she knew how many excessive things she had done to Yuan Tianyi. No. Yuan Tianyi also knew. It was because of this that Yuan Qin was afraid. It didn't matter if Yuan Tianyi was really a waste or just biding her time. Now that she had shown her talent and strength, the family would definitely focus on training her. As for herself, she was the one who had severely offended Yuan Tianyi. Putting herself in Yuan Qin's shoes, she didn't think that Yuan Tianyi would let her go. Therefore, when Gu Shengyin recklessly provoked Yuan Tianqin, no one was happier than Yuan Qin. She couldn't wait for Yuan Tianyi to be a bit more arrogant, completely provoking the anger of the eldest young master, making the eldest young master confront her. It would be best if eldest young master could cripple this person. With eldest young master's talent, even if Yuan Tianyi was crippled, nothing would happen to him, right? Yuan Qin was silently looking forward to it. Hearing Gu Shengyin's words, Yuan Tianqin's heart was filled with killing intent. He looked down at Gu Shengyin from above and said coldly, "If you kneel down and beg me to let you go now, I can consider it." Chi. Gu Shengyin sneered, "Where does your confidence come from? Just because you've eaten a few more years than me?" After saying this, her expression suddenly changed, and she looked at Yuan Tianqin strangely. At the same time, the space in front of Gu Shengyin seemed to be slightly distorted, and a red figure suddenly appeared beside her. As soon as that person appeared, the entire cultivation hall instantly became silent. Except for a small number of people who were absent-minded because of his charm, most of the Yuan family's disciples were directly unable to speak under that terrifying pressure. In fact, it was already very difficult for them to support themselves and stand. Lin Yuan looked straight at Yuan Tianqin. "What you just said, say it again." Chapter 1456. Every time he said a word, the pressure that fell on Yuan Tianqin's body became even heavier. By the time he finished asking, bean-sized beads of sweat had already appeared on Yuan Tianqin's forehead. It was obvious that he was under a lot of pressure at the moment. The teacher next to him looked at the man in red who suddenly appeared in the Yuan family's cultivation hall. He forcibly suppressed the shock in his heart and asked, "Who are you? Why did you appear in my Yuan family's cultivation hall?" Lin Yuan didn't even look at him. He just said indifferently, "Shut up." The teacher was furious. He was about to say something, but he was shocked to find that he couldn't open his mouth. He widened his eyes and stared at Lin Yuan in horror. Who the hell is this person? Lin Yuan just looked down at Yuan Tianqin in front of him with a pale face and pursed lips. There was no warmth in his cold eyes. "Speak." Yuan Tianqin had been bitterly resisting. He gritted his teeth and didn't speak, but the moment Lin Yuan said that word, his mouth opened uncontrollably. He looked a little frightened when he found that he couldn't control himself at all. He said word by word, "If now, you kneel down and beg me to let you go, I can still consider it." Yuan Tianqin had never felt such deep despair before. From the moment he was born, he was the pride of the heavens. After his talent was tested, he was flattered by the entire Yuan family and cultivated with the best resources. He never knew what it felt like to be powerless, and he had never felt the feeling of being humiliated like an ant. This man. Yuan Tianqin clenched his teeth. The tip of his tongue even tasted the taste of blood. One day, he would return all the humiliation he had suffered today. And Yuan Tianyi, that bitch, he would make them die a horrible death. However, before he could finish thinking about the future, he heard the man beside him say indifferently, "Kneel down." Yuan Tianqin didn't have time to react. His legs involuntarily knelt on the ground. There was a loud bang. Yuan Tianqin felt that this time, it wasn't just his legs that knelt down, but also his self-esteem. The rest of the Yuan family's children were completely stunned. They never thought that things would develop to this point. They looked at Yuan Tianqin, who was usually like a god, who had no power to resist in front of this man. He was like an ant that could be trampled upon by others. So the peerless genius of the Yuan clan was still such an insignificant existence in the eyes of a true expert? Gu Shengyin was the only one who was in a normal mood. She clearly told Lin Yuan not to come out unless it was a critical moment, but from the looks of it, this man still couldn't hold it in. Although the other party didn't listen to her, it didn't affect Gu Shengyin's good mood. Today, she had come here to slap their faces. Lin Yuan's method was undoubtedly even more thorough than hers. Moreover, it was obvious that the other party was here to open her eyes. The feeling of hugging a golden finger, oh no, a golden thigh and waiting for death, was not bad. She thought with a smile. Just as she was distracted, Lin Yuan spoke again, "If you apologize to me now and kowtow 3 times, I will consider sparing your life." Gu Shengyin couldn't help but smile. This man was really... Of course, Yuan Tianqin wouldn't be willing. How could a person like him, who had been successful all his life, tolerate himself doing such a shameless thing? But this wasn't something he was willing to do. Chapter 1457. Because, just after Lin Yuan said those words, Yuan Tianqin had already noticed that there seemed to be a force controlling his body in the dark. Even though he clenched his teeth and the tip of his tongue was bleeding, he still said those words. Yuan Tianyi, I apologize to you today. Yuan Tianqin closed his eyes in pain. He even felt that if he had a choice at this moment, he would rather bang his head on the ground and die than say such humiliating words in front of so many people. But he had no choice. In Lin Yuan's words, it would be, "You want to die? No problem, after kowtowing and apologizing, you can die as you please." He just stood there quietly and watched Yuan Tianqin apologize and kowtow. The moment his forehead touched the ground, the hatred in Yuan Tianqin's heart reached its peak. He swore. One day, he would send this man and woman to the Yellow Springs. Yuan Qin, who was watching from the side, was completely pale. At this time, when she looked at Lin Yuan again, she no longer felt that his face was incomparably magnificent. This man was simply a demon. Her body couldn't help but tremble. This man didn't even put Yuan Tianqin, the Yuan family's most powerful genius, in his eyes. Why would he care about her? Right now, she could only try her best to hide behind someone else and pray that the man didn't notice her. Lin Yuan, you've gone too far. A voice that contained anger sounded in the cultivation hall. At the same time, the figure of an old man appeared in front of Lin Yuan. It was the Yuan family's old ancestor. When he appeared, Yuan Tianqin had just finished kowtowing 3 times. As soon as the old man appeared, Yuan Tianqin felt the shackles on his body disappear. He immediately stood up. Old ancestor. Seeing the old man, Yuan Tianqin's eyes lit up and he shouted. As the most talented heir of the Yuan family's younger generation, Yuan Tianqin had naturally seen the old ancestor before. When the others heard his call, they all looked at the old man with excited eyes. The Yuan family's old ancestor. That was a legendary figure. It was said that even the emperor of the Dragon Phoenix Empire had to respectfully bow to him as a junior. Yuan Tianqin's heart relaxed, and the resentment that he had been suppressing uncontrollably emerged. He pointed at Lin Yuan. Forefather, it was this person and Yuan Tianyi behind him who forced me to be humiliated and even wanted my life. With the patriarch by his side, he instantly gained confidence. The old ancestor's expression wasn't good either. When he sensed the aura of the Abyss Lord, he came over just in time to see his most favored junior kowtowing to Yuan Tianyi. Although ancient summoners were indeed powerful, in terms of closeness, Yuan Tianyi's position in his heart was obviously not as high as Yuan Tianqin, whom he had been paying attention to for more than 10 years. The Abyssal Lord was powerful, but doing things like this was clearly trampling on the Yuan family's face. The Yuan family patriarch looked at Lin Yuan with an unpleasant expression, but his tone was still considered polite. Lin Yuan Jun, you've disturbed my Yuan family's cultivation hall with such fanfare. Can you tell this old man what you mean by this? As soon as he spoke, Lin Yuan knew that he was on Yuan Tianqin's side. He didn't even ask what had happened. Thinking of this, he looked at Gu Shengyin with some heartache. Although he knew that Tianyi didn't have a good life in the Yuan family, he still felt angry when he saw her being treated like this with his own eyes. Shout out a monthly vote recommendation vote. Every day to defend the 5th position. Recommend my good friend Huan Chu, Lang Chu's article, Transmigration System, Male God Strategy Guide. Grab all kinds of male gods, tease until your heart softens. Chapter 1458. Since he was angry, Lin Yuan naturally wouldn't hold it in. He turned to look at the Yuan family patriarch. His gaze actually made the Yuan family patriarch feel a trace of pressure. The Yuan family patriarch's heart trembled. He had heard of the 9 Hells Purgatory's ruler, but had never fought him. Previously, he had always thought that even if there was a gap between them, it wouldn't be too big. He didn't expect that a single gaze from him would make him feel threatened. Then, he heard Lin Yuan's cold voice. Yuan family patriarch, I was polite to you earlier only because Tianyi is a member of the Yuan family. If not for that, do you think someone like you would be worthy of my courtesy? These words were already quite impolite. However, the Yuan family patriarch didn't immediately retort. This was because the moment Lin Yuan spoke, the Yuan family's patriarch sensed that an aura had locked onto him from the unseen world the moment Lin Yuan spoke. At his level, he had a certain degree of sensitivity to life and death. He could roughly estimate that if he were to become enemies with this person in front of him, he would be the one to fall in the end. As for the Yuan family disciples at the side, they were all stunned. In their eyes, the Yuan family patriarch was an existence akin to a god. With him around, no one dared to shake the Yuan family in the slightest. But now, there was actually someone who dared to say such arrogant words in front of the Yuan family patriarch? Did this man not know the immensity of heaven and earth, Or was he strong enough to not fear the entire Yuan family? Soon, they found out the answer. Because the omnipotent patriarch in their eyes didn't say anything in the face of such arrogant provocation. The patriarch lowered his head. Yuan Tianqin felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured into his heart. It was as if it was only at this moment that he truly realized what kind of existence he had provoked. An expert that even his own patriarch had to retreat from. The Yuan family patriarch felt that it was a bit embarrassing to act like this in front of a junior, but at his level, he wouldn't be disturbed by such emotions. He said in a low voice, "Although Lin Yuan is strong, you should still be reasonable, right?" Reasonable? It was only when one's martial strength was inferior that the weaker side needed to be reasonable. This was the first time the Yuan family patriarch, who had been strong all his life, said such words. Lin Yuan's gaze paused. Reasonable. He actually nodded his head in a carefree manner. It's fine to be reasonable. This junior of your family scolded my contractor as trash and wanted Tianyi to kneel and beg for mercy. He even wanted her life. Although his tone was calm, each sentence was colder than the last. The Yuan family's old ancestor had only just found out about this matter. Just by thinking about it and connecting it to Yuan Tianqin's temperament, he could roughly understand what had happened. At this time, Lin Yuan suddenly sneered, "I've lived for 10,000 years. This is the first time I've seen someone step on my face like this. Tell me." He looked at the patriarch of the Yuan family and asked, "Does such a person deserve to die?" The Yuan family's old ancestor's heart immediately calmed down. After contracting a magical beast and a summoner had a low-level contract, they would become one entity. Insulting one of them was equivalent to insulting both of them. Tianqin actually said such a thing? No wonder Lord Linyuan was so angry. If it was him, and he was treated like this by a junior, he would have been unable to endure it long ago. Even so, Yuan Tianqin was his most promising successor, the future hope of the Yuan family. He couldn't watch anything happen to him. Chapter 1459. The Yuan family's elder immediately turned his head and scolded Yuan Tianqin, "Junior, you don't know any better. Why aren't you apologizing to Lord Abyss?" Yuan Tianqin was dumbfounded. If he didn't hear wrong, the man in red with an imposing aura just now said that Yuan Tianyi was his contractor? This person wasn't human, but a demonic beast? A demonic beast that could cultivate into a human form. His heart trembled violently because of this thought. But soon, his panic turned into unwillingness. How could a trash like Yuan Tianyi contract with such a powerful demonic beast? No wonder she changed so much. Yuan Tianqin couldn't help but think that if he could also have such a powerful demonic beast, would today's matter be completely different? He didn't think that he, a person with a 9th-level summoner talent, could have the ability to summon a demonic beast like Lord Abyss. Even if he did summon a demonic beast like Lord Abyss, it wouldn't ask for anything from a human, and it wouldn't agree to contract with a human. No matter what he thought, on the surface, Yuan Tianqin bowed to Lord Abyss willingly this time and apologized again. But Lord Abyss didn't have any reaction. At this time, if he wanted to give the Yuan family's elder face, he should say a few words and let this matter pass. But Lord Abyss didn't, which meant this matter wasn't over yet. The Yuan family's elder felt a surge of anger in his heart, but he suppressed it. He couldn't be angry, it was useless. He wasn't Lord Abyss's opponent. Yuan Tianqin, on the other hand, was anxious. Since he saw the elder's attitude towards this person, he had put away his arrogance and pride. This man wasn't someone he could afford to offend. Seeing that Lord Abyss didn't respond, the Yuan family's elder took a deep breath and said, "Lord Abyss, what else are you dissatisfied with?" Lord Abyss's gaze fell on Gu Shengyin, who was standing on the side and watching the show, and said, "What? Apologize to me? Don't you know who you offended?" He didn't need to think to know that this family lowered their heads only because he was here. If he wasn't here today, who knew how much Tianyi would have suffered? Lord Abyss's heart was filled with anger. If he didn't vent this anger, he wouldn't be happy. The Yuan family's patriarch looked at Gu Shengyin, who was standing at the side. His expression was very amiable as he said, "Little Tianyi, you see, your brother Tianqin is young and impetuous, so it's inevitable that he would speak a little rashly. After all, you're also a member of the Yuan family. We're all family. Shouldn't we be more lenient whenever possible?" He felt that as a saint-level expert and Yuan Tianyi's elder, this 10-year-old girl should at least give him some face. However, Gu Shengyin used the truth to tell him that he was thinking too much. When Gu Shengyin heard the Yuan family patriarch's words, she widened her eyes and stared at him. He looked as innocent as he could be, but the words he said made the Yuan family's old ancestor and Yuan Tianqin's faces darken. "That's right. You're young and impetuous. So when you open your mouth, you want me to kneel down. When you close your mouth, you want my life." When Lin Yuan heard this, he chuckled. "If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I won't let them off easily." Tianyi's temperament was indeed to his liking. The Yuan family's old ancestor didn't expect this junior to not give him any face. Chapter 1460. He said in a heavy tone, "Little girl, it's better to leave some leeway. After all, you're also a member of the Yuan family." He was warning her. Gu Shengyin sneered. "Yuan family? If it weren't for Lin Yuan, I'm afraid I wouldn't be in this world anymore." She looked at Lin Yuan, and he nodded. The onlookers didn't know what they were talking about. Gu Shengyin turned around. "Since I've been raised by the Yuan family for 10 years, I'll take Yuan Tianqin's life this time to repay the Yuan family's kindness. What do you think?" She was going to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Yuan family. The Yuan family ancestor felt his heart ache when he heard this. He knew what kind of terrifying talent this little girl had. If she stayed in the Yuan family, with Tianqin, he was confident that the Yuan family would be able to suppress the other families and become the strongest family in the Dragon Phoenix Empire. However, after thinking about it, he realized that even if he left Yuan Tianyi in the Yuan family, she would still be at odds with the Yuan family. He might as well hold on to Tianqin and have a chance to take revenge in the future. He nodded with a helpless expression. "Tianyi, you're still a descendant of the Yuan family. I didn't expect you to be like this, without any attachment to the Yuan family." Gu Shengyin sneered. "Everyone knows what the truth is like. There's no need to act like this. Even if the ancestor doesn't find it tiring, it hurts my eyes." With Lin Yuan as her backer, Gu Shengyin wasn't afraid of offending the Yuan family ancestor at all. Moreover, she had already thoroughly offended him. Both sides swore an oath. Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief when she said that she was no longer a member of the Yuan family. This world attached great importance to family clans. If she did anything in the future, the Yuan family would always tie her hands and feet. She might as well take this opportunity to make a clean break. On the other hand, the Yuan family's old ancestor's face was dark as he looked at her relieved expression. His heart was filled with killing intent. Today, he had felt the humiliation he had never felt before in his life. In the end, all of this was caused by this Yuan family junior in front of him. He would remember it bit by bit and find an opportunity to return it. At this moment, he didn't even want to look at the two of them. He only said in a deep voice, "Since the two of you don't like my Yuan family, then please." However, Lin Yuan did not move. He said, "There's no hurry. There are still 2 things I haven't done yet." Hearing Zhang Xian's tone, the Yuan clan's patriarch panicked. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. 2 blood-curdling screams came from the Yuan family disciple beside him. The Yuan family's old ancestor immediately looked at Yuan Tianqin, who was beside him. He saw blood flowing out from the corner of Yuan Tianqin's mouth. Yuan Tianqin was looking at him with eyes full of hatred and unwillingness. His tongue had just been cut off by someone. The Yuan family patriarch suddenly looked at Lin Yuan. "Why didn't you keep your word?" Lin Yuan said calmly, "You don't keep your word? I only promised to spare his dog life. What's the point of keeping this tongue that doesn't know how to speak?" As for the other one, his tone was full of disgust. You keep calling people trash. Have a taste of what it's like to be trash who can't cultivate. The other one he was talking about was Yuan Qin. Yuan Qin was currently lying on the ground with a pale face. Just now, she suddenly felt as if an invisible hand had violently pulled something out of her body. Chapter 1461. She didn't react at first, but now she knew. That terrifying man had actually crippled her. Yuan Qin forgot to be afraid this time. She didn't have any strength, so she could only look at Lin Yuan with resentful eyes, wishing she could drink his blood. But how could Lin Yuan be afraid of her? He said faintly, "If you keep looking, don't even think about keeping your eyes." Yuan Qin didn't lose her mind. She knew that this man would definitely do what he said. She could only lower her head in resentment. She hated it. After the intense resentment, there was despair. What did she rely on to come to the main family from the side branch? He relied on his talent. But now, she had become like this. After staying in the main family for a few years, Yuan Qin clearly knew how ruthless this family was. Once she was of no use to the family, she, who came from the side branch, would definitely go back to where she came from. Yuan Qin had a flamboyant personality. When she returned home in the past, she showed off to her brothers and sisters who were not as talented as her and offended many people. She used to think that she would be like this for the rest of her life. Who would have thought that she would encounter such a thing? Thinking about it, she knew what she would face if she was sent back like this. For a moment, Yuan Qin felt that she might as well die and be done with it. But she didn't have the courage. After a while, Yuan Qin raised her head, but sadly found that not many people cared about her. Even the old ancestor only had eyes for the eldest young master who had his tongue cut off. Yuan Qin laughed at herself. Yes, she was just one of the many disciples of the Yuan family. It didn't matter if there was one more or one less. How could she compare to the eldest young master? She saw that the old ancestor was angry because of the eldest young master and seemed to be arguing with the other side. But the man in red on the opposite side had always been indifferent, firmly protecting Yuan Tianyi behind him. In the end, the old ancestor was helpless. Under the gaze of so many Yuan family disciples, Lin Yuan took Yuan Tianyi's hand and left the Yuan family. The two didn't even pack their things. However, Yuan Tianyi really didn't have anything to pack. Both of them knew what kind of life he used to live in the Yuan family. You were really... Lin Yuan tilted his head. Gu Shengyin smiled. Especially handsome. Lin Yuan smiled when he heard this. Where do you want to go? Gu Shengyin shook her head and thought for a moment. Let's go to your territory and have a look. In the very beginning of the story, Yuan Tianyi, who had become a winner in life, had no place to conquer. Lin Yuan was cold for a moment, then he bent his eyes. All right. The two of them spent 2 days to arrive at the legendary 9 Hells Purgatory, the place where humans could enter but never leave. After that, she lived there for 10 years. In 10 years, the entire magical beast continent was in turmoil, and geniuses emerged in large numbers. However, no one knew that a girl with the bloodline of an ancient summoner was quietly growing. Lin Yuan was sitting on a cliff. Colorful flowers bloomed on both sides of the cliff. When the wind blew, one could smell the greasy fragrance of the flowers. Further away, one could see many green trees. It was actually a very lively valley. No one had ever imagined that the legendary 9 Hells Purgatory would look like this. However, if you look down from the cliff from the edge of the cliff, you will know that this is still 9 Hells Purgatory. Because at the bottom of this unfathomably deep cliff, there was no misty cloud, but scarlet flames. Chapter 1462. That flame was not an ordinary flame, but the most tyrannical and powerful 9 underworld hellfire in the entire 9 underworld purgatory. No matter if it was a human or any other creature, they would die upon contact with it, and not even their bones would remain, turning into ashes. From the beginning to the end, there was only one exception. the ruler of the 9 underworld purgatory who was born from the 9 underworld hellfire, Lin Yuan. The 9 underworld hellfire that others avoided was not only not terrifying to Lin Yuan, but was instead very intimate. Lin Yuan. A clear voice came from behind him. Lin Yuan did not turn his head, but his face revealed a trace of a smile. He knew who had come. He turned around and saw that girl wearing a sky-blue dress riding on a silver-white fur magic beast, coming towards him. That magic beast had silver-white fur, and when it ran, it was like moonlight falling on her body. She had gentle big blue eyes, and a white jade-like horn standing on top of her head, looking very beautiful. This very gentle-looking magic beast was precisely the one that Gu Shangyin encountered after coming to the 9 underworld purgatory. It was also Yuan Tianyi's contracted magic beast in the very beginning of the storyline, Moonlight Unicorn. In the Unicorn clan, as long as their bloodline was pure, almost all of them surpassed the 9th rank magic beast and entered the holy beast level. And the Moonlight Unicorn was considered a king-level existence among the unicorns, famous because of its extremely unique fur that flowed down like the cold moonlight. However, Gu Xingyin's contracted magic beast was Lin Yuan, and this Moonlight Unicorn was only one of her many summoned magic beasts. When it came to Gu Shangyin, the advantage of an ancient summoner was truly reflected. After experiencing so many worlds, Gu Xingyin's soul power could be described as endless. And the number of magic beasts that an ancient summoner could summon was completely dependent on how strong her soul power was. Even Lin Yuan, after feeling Gu Xingyin's soul, couldn't help but exclaim, this kind of bloodline, in addition to the soul power that was like the blessing of the gods. As a contractor, he was simply like the darling of the heavenly Tao. As the protagonist, wasn't he the darling of the heavenly Tao? Not to mention, Gu Shangyin had such a huge cheat on her. The Moonlight Unicorn stopped when it was about 30 meters away from the waterside abyss. She bent her knees slightly and bent her body so that Gu Shangyin could get down more easily. Gu Shangyin jumped down from her back and reached out to touch her head. "Ah yow, thank you." The Moonlight Unicorn gently rubbed against her hand before leaving. Gu Shangyin walked towards the people at the edge of the cliff. Lin Yuan didn't like to be disturbed, so these magical beasts were very tactful and spontaneously stopped when they were still a long time away from him. From the beginning to the end, the only one who could get close to him without fear of being rejected was Gu Shangyin. "Are you going out?" The person who asked was Lin Yuan. Gu Shangyin nodded. How can the Zhen family get first place in the summoner conference that is held once every 20 years? She had heard that the peerless genius of the Zhen family was the most promising person to get first place. Wasn't the peerless genius of the Zhen family Yuan Tianqin? Losing his tongue didn't affect his cultivation. On the contrary, it was said that his cultivation speed had increased a lot in the past 10 years. Gu Shangyin was more concerned about another news. Chapter 1463. Because the eldest young master of the Yuan family couldn't speak, he always had a girl by his side. He didn't know what kind of method she used, but the girl was able to perceive what the eldest young master wanted to say at the first moment and express it. For this point, even if the girl couldn't cultivate, she was still the number one person beside Yuan Tianqin. This girl was Yuan Qin. Gu Shangyin didn't know how Yuan Qin did it. She only knew that she absolutely couldn't let the combination of Yuan Qin and Yuan Tianqin take first place. When she told Lin Yuan her thoughts, Lin Yuan was still very disapproving. "The two who offended you back then. If you really don't like them, I'll just take their lives." Gu Shangyin shook his head. For Yuan Qin and Yuan Tianqin, it would be more unbearable for them to be easily defeated by a person they had always looked down on and let them know that they were worse than trash, than asking them to die. Gu Shangyin had plenty of time to slowly waste time with them. She said her thoughts. Even if Lin Yuan didn't necessarily agree, he wouldn't refute her. Gu Shangyin thought for a moment. It seemed that since she came to this world, Lin Yuan had never objected to any of her thoughts. He always indulged her. "Aren't you afraid that I will be raised to have a lawless temperament?" Gu Shangyin said. Lin Yuan looked at her with a smile. "So what if you're lawless? With me here, would there be anyone on this continent who doesn't have eyes and provokes you?" Gu Shengyin suddenly looked at him and said, "No matter what I want, will you agree and not refuse?" Her tone seemed a little serious. Lin Yuan looked at her for a second, not knowing what she was thinking. However, after thinking carefully for a moment, he still nodded, "As long as I have it, as long as I can give it." After he finished speaking, he felt a blur in front of his eyes, and a pair of slightly cold hands had already wrapped around his neck. Lin Yuan didn't feel anything wrong. This kind of intimacy was just a common occurrence for the two of them. But today seemed a little different. After Gu Shengyin wrapped her arms around his neck, her whole body leaned towards him. Their foreheads touched, and they could hear each other's breathing. Gu Shengyin looked into Lin Yuan's eyes. Lin Yuan's pupils looked no different from an ordinary person's, but at such a close distance, she could see that his pupils were not the same black as an ordinary person's, but were dyed with a faint layer of dark red. Very beautiful, Gu Shengyin thought. Lin Yuan's expression didn't change. He just focused on Gu Shengyin, as if he was thinking about what she was going to do. Gu Shengyin smiled sweetly. "You said that no matter what I want, as long as you can give it to me, you will give it to me, right?" Lin Yuan's voice seemed to carry a trace of disorder. However, he still nodded. "It is as you have heard." Gu Shengyin blinked. "What if I want you?" Silence. A wind blew from the bottom of the cliff, carrying a trace of the unique coldness of the 9 underworld's fire. Lin Yuan did not speak. Gu Shengyin was not in a hurry, and looked at him patiently. Then, she felt her waist tighten, and a pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist. A hoarse voice sounded in her ear, "If you want it." Gu Shengyin burst out laughing. She stepped back a little and received a somewhat dissatisfied look from Lin Yuan. "Then tell me, is it you who wants it, or I want it?" Chapter 1464. Lin Yuan looked at Gu Shengyin with a complacent smile, as if he had already guessed something. He couldn't help but laugh as well. Holding her tightly in his arms, he sighed, "I've been waiting for you for a long time, and I've finally heard your words." Gu Shengyin leaned against his chest and could clearly hear his powerful and rapid heartbeat. It was for her. She had some bad thoughts and said, "I've been waiting for a long time. How old was I at that time? I didn't expect you to be such a person." Hearing the hidden laughter in her words, Lin Yuan didn't expose her. He replied very seriously, "In fact, Tianyi, from the night you summoned me 10 years ago, you were destined to only belong to me in this life." His heart was very small, and could only accommodate one person. Moreover, that person could only belong to her. From Gu Shengyin's summoned magical beasts, it could be seen that they were all docile and cute female beasts, and there wasn't even a single male beast. Moreover, even if it was a female beast, he wouldn't allow Gu Shengyin to be too close to them. This man was even jealous of magical beasts. When Gu Shengyin heard his swear-like words, she was stunned for a moment, and then the smile on her face disappeared. She looked at Lin Yuan seriously and said, "What a coincidence. Actually, when I first saw you 10 years ago, I felt that such a beautiful and powerful man must belong to me." Lin Yuan's eyes trembled for a moment, and the corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. "Well, when your matters are over, let's conclude a companion contract, right?" A companion contract. With the soul as an oath, the two people who became companions would share everything about their companions, including their lifespan, cultivation, status. This kind of ancient contract had long been lost in the current magical beast continent. Unexpectedly, this man still remembered it. Gu Shengyin looked at the smile on his face and pretended not to hear the disorderly heartbeat in his ears. "All right." She thought for a moment and suddenly remembered something. So she said to Lin Yuan, "Close your eyes." Lin Yuan didn't quite understand what she was going to do, but he still obediently closed his eyes. Gu Shengyin stretched out her right hand. A bright green light shone from her hand, and then, "Open your eyes." Lin Yuan opened his eyes but was stunned. A sky full of red petals fell down, fluttering about as if there was no end, drowning the two of them in this wave of fire. In front of him was a bouquet of red flowers in full bloom. This flower, Lin Yuan suddenly remembered that 10 years ago, Tian Yi seemed to have given him a similar flower. It seemed to be called Rose. Gu Shengyin handed the flower to him and said with a smile, "In a faraway place, people there use this kind of red rose to symbolize warm and beautiful love. This kind of flower is also used during courtship. I'm giving him to you now, Lin Yuan." 99 red roses symbolize everlasting love. She smiled like a flower. "Are you willing to accept it?" Lin Yuan stretched out his hand and embraced Gu Shengyin into his arms with the flower. The rain of flowers still didn't stop, and soon the ground was covered with a thick layer of red petals. The two people, one in red and one in blue, quietly embraced each other in this fiery world. It seemed to be, as Gu Shengyin said, eternal and unchanging. Chapter 1465. After some time, Gu Shengyin and Lin Yuan left the Nine Hells Purgatory and began to set foot on the magical beast continent that they hadn't been to for 10 years. The Summoner Conference had been going on for a long time. Those summoners without any background naturally needed to start from the lowest level of competition and go up one round at a time. However, it was different for the summoners from the big families and forces. They could directly skip the beginning of the competition and directly enter the last few rounds of the assessment. Regarding this, whether it was those summoners without background or those with background, they had no objections. The reason was that from the beginning of the competition, the number of people who advanced in each round was determined. Those civilian summoners had a lot less innate advantages compared to those summoners with the support of big families' resources. And if there were no summoners from big families participating, the number of people who advanced could also be increased. And for those summoners with powerful backgrounds, the early rounds of the competition weren't difficult. It was nothing more than a waste of time to increase their exposure. So everyone tacitly agreed with this rule. Only a small number of people might have different ideas. For example, this time, the most popular winner was the eldest son of the Yuan family, Yuan Tianqin. This person started from the first round of the preliminary test and went up one round at a time. What he wanted was not only first place, but also fame throughout the continent. So he had to participate in every round. Not only did he have to participate, but he had to win. Not only did he have to win, but he had to win beautifully. He had to win shock. But Yuan Tianqin's so-called shock method was a bit excessive. Every summoner who fought against Yuan Tianqin was almost beaten half to death. None of the summoners who were defeated by him came out unscathed. The lighter ones vomited blood, the heavier ones were even crippled on the spot, and even their summoned beasts were bitten to death by Yuan Tianqin's purple-winged thunder dragon. So along with Yuan Tianqin's reputation as a genius, there was also his tyranny. But even so, there were still countless young summoners who worshipped this man and even set him as their goal. As for the summoners you mentioned who were defeated and crippled by his hands, their skills were inferior. Who could they blame? When Gu Shengyin sat in the tea-house and heard such remarks, she simply laughed in her heart. Just because you're strong and you've won, you can easily destroy the decades of hard work of others? Those people who said such things had never faced Yuan Tianqin before, right? Gu Shengyin recalled the cold and merciless gaze of that young man 10 years ago, and her heart trembled. Yuan Tianqin was still the same. But since that was the case, Gu Shengyin smiled. She was best at giving others a taste of their own medicine. After putting the money on the table, Gu Shengyin got up and walked out. Soon, she arrived at the competition venue of the Summoner Conference. Of course, it was the venue for the finals. Gu Shengyin looked at the jade slip in her hand. There was a bright red number, 27, on it. Of course, she was the kind with a background. When the contestants from Nine Hells Purgatory, Lin Yuan personally went to the organizer to ask for a spot, the expressions of those old fellows became more and more interesting. Even someone from Nine Hells Purgatory came, and it was Lin Yuan who personally came to ask for a spot. An old man in a white robe looked a little serious with a hint of expectation. "I'm afraid that the Summoner Conference this time will be more exciting than we imagined," Lin Li exclaimed. 8 o'clock ended. Look at my sincere little eyes. Please vote, 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 vote. I'll dance in circles for you to see. Good night. Chapter 1466. There wasn't much difference between the rules of the finals and the preliminaries. It was still a one-on-one competition. The winner would advance to the next round. If there was a difference, it was probably that the strength of the opponents increased with each round. Gu Shengyin attracted a lot of attention when she first went on stage. After all, the prefix of her name was Nine Hells Purgatory. Everyone had heard of Nine Hells Purgatory, but they had never heard of a summoner appearing there, so everyone was very curious. However, Gu Shengyin's performance had always been very normal. She had only summoned a level 9 magical beast, Flaming Skylark. Although it was also very powerful, it was still somewhat lacking compared to Yuan Tianqin and the others' amazing strength. Many people looked at Gu Shengyin and shook their heads, saying that this contestant from Nine Hells Purgatory was still too young compared to the others. In other words, they didn't think highly of her. However, Gu Shengyin didn't care. She naturally had her reasons for doing so. Yuan Tianqin also paid attention to Gu Shengyin. When he heard that the other party was from Nine Hells Purgatory, his expression instantly turned cold. The hatred of having his tongue cut off 10 years ago was still in his heart. As long as there was a chance, he would never let go of a chance to take revenge. Yuan Tianqin naturally also hated in her heart. Yuan Tianqin only lost a tongue, but she, her entire person, had lost the rules to become a summoner. No one knew how much effort she had put in to be able to stay in the Yuan family, and no one knew how much effort she had put in to stay by Yuan Tianqin's side and become his most trusted subordinate. But that wasn't important anymore. She stayed by Yuan Tianqin's side, and the two of them had the same goal, to take revenge one day. To take revenge on the ruler of Nine Hells Purgatory, the Lord of the Abyss, and Yuan Tianyi, who had caused them to become like this. However, the funny thing was that the two of them were gnashing their teeth in hatred, but when they saw Gu Shengyin, they didn't recognize her. Originally, Yuan Tianyi didn't have a good life in the Yuan family. When she was 10 years old, she was the same as other children when they were 7 or 8 years old. Skinny, small, pale, and her delicate face was lowered all year round. She didn't attract any attention. However, things were different in Nine Hells Purgatory. Lin Yuan almost treated Gu Shengyin as a treasure in the palm of his hand. In the vast Nine Hells Purgatory, there were countless treasures. Those heavenly and earthly treasures with mild medicinal properties that outsiders coveted were all given to Gu Shengyin as snacks by Lin Yuan. After 10 years, Gu Shengyin and Yuan Tianyi as a child, whether in appearance or temperament, were like two different people. She also used a fake name to participate in the competition, Gu Yuan. It would be strange if those two could still recognize her. However, even if he didn't recognize that Gu Shengyin was Yuan Tianyi, who they had hated for 10 years, Yuan Tianqin didn't plan to let her go when he heard that she was from Nine Hells Purgatory. Since he couldn't take revenge on Yuan Tianyi and the Lord of the Abyss, he could vent his anger on those who were related to them. Wasn't he afraid of being held accountable for the competition? When he was nervous, he didn't know how to control his strength. If something went wrong, he wouldn't be able to control it, right? No matter how strong you are, the Lord of the Abyss can't be unreasonable, right? However, Yuan Tianqin, who had a good plan in his heart, did not expect that Gu Shengyin, who was already a cripple in his eyes, had the same idea in his heart. Chapter 1467. Although the two sides hadn't met yet, they had been secretly looking forward to it for a long time. Finally, Gu Shengyin heard the voice she had been waiting for a long time. Next match, number 27 Gu Yuan versus number 38 Yuan Tianqin. Gu Shengyin calmly walked into the arena. In order to avoid Yuan Tianqin's suspicion, Lin Yuan hadn't appeared in the arena. However, Gu Shengyin knew that person must be watching her from somewhere not far away. At this time, Yuan Tianqin also stood in the arena. Yuan Qin stood closest to the arena, so she could act as Yuan Tianqin's mouthpiece at any time. Gu Shengyin smiled, raised her hand, and saluted. I've long heard of the Yuan family's genius. Yuan Tianqin just looked at her coldly. Yuan Qin said, there's no need to salute people from the 9 hells purgatory. Let's start. The competition has no eyes, so it's better to be careful. Gu Shengyin didn't get angry, as if she didn't hear Yuan Qin's threat. She just smiled and said, thank you for your concern, but I might not be able to control my emotions during the competition. You have to be careful too. Yuan Tianqin sneered, feeling sad for this little girl who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He had seen her previous matches. Although she was indeed very strong, there was still a certain gap between her and him. Yuan Tianqin was almost certain that he could win this match. He glanced at Yuan Qin. Yuan Qin immediately said, since both sides admit that they might not be able to control their emotions during the competition, if something unexpected happens later, it's best that we don't blame each other. Yuan Qin's voice was very loud, so Gu Shengyin was sure that the judges and audience had heard it. She was still smiling as she nodded. When Yuan Tianqin turned around, a cold smile appeared on his lips. Gu Shengyin saw it. She was also laughing in her heart. You were waiting for this sentence, but how would you know that I was also waiting for you to say it? The competition officially began. Both sides summoned their beasts at the first moment. It was also a magical beast of the 9th rank. Yuan Tianqin's purple-winged thunder dragon was domineering and powerful, while the flame skylark behind Gu Shengyin was graceful. The situation was on the verge of breaking out. Actually, at their age, they were far from being able to fully control a magical beast of the 9th rank. But even if it was only a part of their strength, the power displayed by the 2 magical beasts of the 9th rank was still very impressive. Among the few matches today, this was the most interesting one. But was Gu Shengyin really unable to fully control a magical beast of the 9th rank? That was not the case. Summoners used their soul strength to determine their strength. In this aspect, there was probably no summoner in the entire continent of magical beasts that could compare to Gu Shengyin. She just liked to see her opponent pour a bucket of cold water over his head when he thought that victory was in his hands. Wasn't Yuan Tianqin arrogant? I'll let you enjoy yourself for a while. Later, she would tell him what true despair was. The 2 magical beasts in the field had already begun to fight. They were both magical beasts of the 9th rank that were famous for their attacks. Moreover, they were the natural enemies of birds and beasts on land. In addition, their respective masters hated each other. As soon as these 2 magical beasts started fighting, they didn't even try to test each other. They just put on a desperate posture. Gu Shengyin watched quietly. Ordinary people seemed to think that it was a tie, but in the eyes of people with discerning eyes, the flame skylark just looked intimidating. In fact, it was still slightly inferior to the purple-winged thunder dragon. Chapter 1468. The strength displayed by the raging flame skylark was indeed slightly inferior to the purple-winged thunder dragon. Even a few moments of carelessness caused her gorgeous feathers to be scratched off by the other party's claws. Yuan Tianqin's lips curled into a smile. He closed his eyes, and his mind moved slightly, as if issuing some order. At this moment, the purple-winged thunder dragon suddenly opened its mouth, and a huge purple lightning bolt struck towards the raging flame skylark. This lightning bolt was obviously menacing, and the raging flame skylark hurriedly dodged backwards. According to the normal development, this purple-winged thunder dragon should take advantage of the victory to pursue and attack, taking advantage of the raging flame skylark's flustered state to give a head-on blow. In this way, the outcome of this competition could basically be determined. But the purple-winged thunder dragon didn't do so. What Yuan Tianqin wanted was not just such a victory. The purple-winged thunder dragon's huge body suddenly turned in one direction, heading towards Gu Shengyin, who was looking worriedly at the raging flame skylark. A bolt of lightning comparable to the attack just now shot out from its mouth, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Gu Shengyin. Such a powerful attack, even a 9th-rank magical beast like the raging flame skylark with super-strong defense, didn't dare to meet it head-on. If the summoner's weak body faced it, many people had quietly turned their heads away, unable to bear to see the next scene. Yuan Tianqin, on the other hand, stared unblinkingly in the direction of Gu Shengyin, and even a trace of excitement mixed with expectation appeared in his eyes. That bolt of lightning, without any accident, fell straight on top of Gu Shengyin's head. However, the scene of blood splattering out that everyone imagined did not appear. A soft silver-white halo appeared beside Gu Shengyin, blocking this fatal blow for her. When the light dissipated, a beautiful and elegant figure appeared beside Gu Shengyin. She had a graceful posture, beautiful hair, and gentle eyes as she quietly looked at the field. The most eye-catching thing was the huge jade-colored horn on her head. Unicorn. Some of the spectators had already recognized the species of this magical beast. At the front of the judging panel, the sharp-eyed judges immediately recognized that it was not only a unicorn, but also the king of unicorns, the Moonlight Unicorn. What's going on? Why would a saint beast suddenly appear here? While the judge was speaking, his fiery gaze was still fixed on the unicorn in the middle of the field. That was a saint beast. It was a saint-level magical beast that many high-level summoners yearned for, but never got to see in their entire lives. Only Yuan Tianqin didn't look good. Just now, he had almost succeeded. Referee, is this considered cheating? Yuan Qin said coldly to the referee at the side. When summoners competed, they could only fight with their summoned beasts. Gu Shengyin's summoned beast was obviously the fiery skylark. Even if she summoned a sacred beast, it would not change the fact that she had broken the rules. The referee was stunned for a moment, then he turned around and looked at Gu Shengyin seriously. I announce that because one of the contestants has broken the rules. Wait a minute. Gu Shengyin suddenly shouted. All eyes fell on her from all directions. Gu Shengyin slightly raised the corner of her lips and smiled arrogantly. Who said I cheated? Who set the rule that a summoner can only have one summoned beast? Chapter 1469. She raised her palm high up in the air. Everyone could clearly see that a mysterious array was shining in the center of her right palm. At the same time, the same array appeared on the forehead of the Moonlight Unicorn. In other words, this Moonlight Unicorn holy beast was really summoned by her. The crowd was in an uproar. A summoner could only summon one magical beast. This was a law that had been around for thousands of years. And now, this law had been broken. Everyone in the audience was looking at Gu Shengyin and the unicorn beside her. For a moment, no one cared about the outcome of this match. Yuan Tianqin looked at this scene with an ashen face. When he saw Gu Shengyin's right hand light up, he knew that no matter what, he had already lost in some aspects of this match. At this moment, Gu Shengyin raised her head and smiled at him. That laughter contained undisguised mockery and complacency, clearly mocking his previous thoughts. An unknown anger surged in his heart. Outside the arena, Yuan Qin looked at the referee and asked, Referee, the match hasn't ended yet. Please continue with your ruling. The referee was stunned for a moment. He clearly didn't expect Yuan Tianqin's side to take the initiative to request to continue the match. After all, in his mind, Gu Shengyin had one more summoned beast. Moreover, it was a holy beast, so the outcome was obvious. Yuan Tianqin also thought about it for a moment. Although the Moonlight Unicorn holy beast was powerful, it wasn't focused on attacking. It was more focused on speed and bringing good luck. In other words, it didn't have much attacking power. In that case, he didn't necessarily have no chance of winning. At this moment, Gu Shengyin spoke again. Young Master Yuan, are you sure we want to continue? She pointed at the Moonlight Unicorn beside her and the flaming skylark behind her. She smiled proudly. If we continue, we won't be fighting one-on-one anymore. She purposely emphasized the words, one-on-one, as if to emphasize something. Yuan Tianqin looked at her proud expression and tone and felt displeased. He simply ignored Gu Shengyin. Yuan Qin directly said to the referee, Can we continue? When the referee saw that neither of them had any intention of stopping, he could only announce the continuation of the match. At this time, the atmosphere in the field had reached its climax. Everyone was excitedly watching the 2-versus-1 battle in the field. There was even a legendary sacred beast participating in the battle. There were even spectators from other competition venues who rushed over after hearing the news. For a moment, there was a sea of people. Everyone's focus was on Gu Shengyin. Even the judges were sighing. No wonder they felt that something was wrong. The 9 Hells Purgatory had never produced a disciple before. It was impossible for them to produce a disciple this time. She was just an ordinary genius. So the surprise was waiting for him here. In the field, Gu Shengyin didn't rush to make a move. Instead, she said to Yuan Tianqin seriously, "If you really want to compete again, I won't hold back anymore." Yuan Tianqin's response was that the purple-winged thunder dragon behind him soared up, and purple lightning shot towards them. Gu Shengyin clicked her tongue and shook her head. "I already said not to be impulsive. When I get serious, even I am afraid of myself." She stretched out her right hand again. After the Moonlight Unicorn Holy Beast blocked the purple-winged thunder dragon's attack, everyone's eyes fell on Gu Shengyin. What was she going to do? Chapter 1470. Soon they knew what Gu Shengyin was going to do. This was because as the white lights lit up one after another, 3 figures appeared consecutively in the field. The people in the audience were stunned. Even the judges were so shocked by this scene that they were speechless. 9 nether soul-devouring beast, red flame beast, and blue-eyed golden-eyed beast. 3 holy beasts appeared in the field. Many people felt that there might be something wrong with their eyes. But it was fine if there was something wrong with their eyes, but could it be that there was something wrong with everyone's eyes? This, really, living in the legends, the magical beasts that ordinary people had only seen in ancient records in their lifetime, now all appeared in front of them. Most of them turned to look at Gu Shengyin in shock. Who was this girl who could summon so many high-level and even saint-level magical beasts? No wonder, with such strength, no wonder the 9 nether purgatory let her out. Not to mention that she summoned a bunch of saint-level magical beasts. Even if she summoned a bunch of low-level magical beasts, with a number, she could kill a lot of people. Gu Shengyin kept looking at Yuan Tianqin. The moment Yuan Tianqin saw these 3 magical beasts, his face became strange. He seemed to open his mouth, but how could Gu Shengyin give him a chance to admit defeat? She moved her divine soul, and the blue-eyed golden-eyed beast, which was as huge as a hill, roared. Only its roar could be heard in the whole field, and some people with weaker physiques were even directly shaken to the point that their faces turned pale. The judge naturally couldn't hear any other sound. At this moment, except for the Moonlight Unicorn, which had been quietly guarding Gu Shengyin, the other 4 top magical beasts directly used 4 killing moves in the direction of the purple-winged thunder dragon and Yuan Tianqin. The dust settled. Yuan Qin, who was standing outside the field, looked pale. She and Yuan Tianqin were connected mentally, and at this moment, she could feel that the connection between them was so weak that it almost didn't exist. What did this mean? It meant that Yuan Tianqin was now in a very bad state, and might even die at any time. Everyone was still in a state of shock. Seeing this scene, they didn't even react. It was Gu Shengyin who reminded the referee, who looked like he was sleepwalking. She seemed to be a little uneasy. "Referee, I already said that if I use my full strength, I won't be able to control them. After all, my soul force is limited. There are so many big fellows, and they won't listen to my orders." All the demonic beasts. Yes, Master's acting skills were superb. Since their master had said so, these magical beasts naturally had to give face. Their eyes were cold and arrogant, as if they didn't put anyone in their eyes. At this moment, Gu Shengyin spoke up again, that, the eldest son of the Zhen family, she pointed at a crater that had been smashed into the ground. "You are lying." At this time, a sharp voice came from outside the arena. It was Yuan Qin, who had a crazy look on her face. She stared at Gu Shengyin and said, "Stop pretending. You're obviously trying to kill young Master Xiao on purpose. Gu Shangyin had an innocent look on her face. She looked at Yuan Qin with a look of understanding. Let's not talk about it anymore. Let the rescue team come in first, she said very understandingly. However, the rescue team stood outside the arena and looked at the 5 domineering magical beasts in the arena. They didn't dare to come in at all. This contestant herself said that she might not be able to control these magical beasts. What if they went in and encountered these magical beasts that were fierce? You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.